Welcome to the Channelchek Takeaway Series. This program is provided for informational purposes only, and none of its content should be interpreted as a recommendation or solicitation to buy or sell securities. Investment decisions must be made by you or with the support of your financial advisor. A complete disclosure statement follows each presentation. VolitionRx, NYSE American ticker symbol VNRX, is a multinational epigenetics company that applies its nucleosomics platform through its subsidiaries to develop simple, easy-to-use, cost-effective blood tests to help diagnose and monitor a range of life-altering diseases in both humans and other animals, including some cancers and diseases associated with NETosis, such as sepsis and COVID-19. Joining us today is Scott Powell, EVP of IR for VolitionRx and CIO for Volition America. Following a brief introduction to the company, Frank will be joined by Noble Senior Research Analyst Greg Aurand for a Q&A. Take it away, Scott.
Everyone, and a special thanks to Noble Capital for having VolitionRx Limited here present through the Channelchek Takeaway Series, follow-up from the J.P.Morgan Healthcare Week last week in San Francisco. Much appreciated for the opportunity here to talk about the VolitionRx Limited story. I'm Scott Powell. I'm the head of investor relations for VolitionRx. Our company is publicly traded on the NYSE American Stock Exchange, ticker VNRX. And would just like to quickly point you to our forward-looking statements and disclaimer slide. Just a reminder that I will be making some forward-looking statements during today's presentation, which may or may not materialize in the future. And so we do claim protection under the Safe Harbor Act. So please just take a quick look at the forward-looking statements and disclaimer. A little bit about Volition. We are a diagnostics company. We're working predominantly in blood, and we are developing blood tests to screen for different diseases in both animals and humans. Our key focus areas, as you can see from this slide, are NucleoVet and NucleoNets. So I'll spend most of the time talking about these two verticals. NucleoVet is front and center, especially with our recent announcement of a supply agreement with IDEX Corporation for our blood test to screen for cancer in canines. And then I'll move to NucleoNets afterwards. So just bear with me while I move to the NucleoVet section of our deck. So the brand name is the NucleoVet Cancer Screening Test. And screening for cancer in canines is a major challenge currently. As you can see from this slide, there are about 84 million canines in the US. Each year, 6 million of those canines are diagnosed with cancer. The problem is that the vast majority of those canines diagnosed with cancer are diagnosed typically because they're symptomatic first. So they're demonstrably sick. They then go to the vet. The vet tries to determine what's causing the symptoms. And if it is coming from an underlying cancer, it's invariably a late stage, stage 3 or stage 4. It's very difficult to treat. Often, many times the cancer is metastasized. So unfortunately, you don't have a lot of good options when your canine is diagnosed with late-stage cancer. And unfortunately, most of these canines are diagnosed with late-stage cancer because there is no asymptomatic screening for cancer in canines currently until our blood tests really entered the market front and center over the past few weeks. We have signed 2 supply/distribution agreements with major players that we believe in 2023 will really start to propel sales of our cancer screening test in canines. Why are canines not screened asymptomatically for cancer? It's simply too expensive, too invasive, and too risky. The only confirmatory diagnostic tests to confirm cancer in canines are either biopsies, so taking tissue sample or samples from potentially malignant tumors in different parts of the canine's body, or through imaging technologies, so X-rays, CAT scans, MRIs, and so forth, to look into different organs. In either case, these modalities are expensive, they are invasive, and they're not without risk. There's a risk, of course, of infection, various complications, In either case, the animal has to be given anesthesia, and certain animals, certain canines have adverse reactions to anesthesia. So for these reasons, you simply don't take a 5 or a 7-year-old German Shepherd, for instance, into your veterinarian clinic for a wellness check and say, to the veterinarian, I'd like to spend another, $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 for you to, biopsy my German Shepherd's spleen and liver and run a full body CT scan. When the animal's healthy, you simply don't do that, right? It's too expensive, it's too invasive. There's no reason or early warning sign for doing such a thing. With our blood test, canine owners now have the option to screen asymptomatically for cancer in their canines. Our test is not detecting cancer per se. It is giving a score as to the likelihood that cancer is present. And so it acts as an early warning blood test or an early warning sign. And so if a healthy canine is brought in to the vet for a wellness check and a Volition blood test is run, it comes back as a high risk score that your canine probably has cancer, then some of these biopsies, some of these imaging technologies would likely be performed at that point, because there's a determination made that your canine probably does have cancer. And so it's a much more targeted approach. And at this point, it would make sense if your canine has a positive result from our blood test, it would make sense to proceed with some of these more expensive, invasive diagnostic tests. And unlike in human health, where a human that may have cancer could have any of 20, 30, 40, 50 different types of cancers, certain breeds of canines are really predisposed to getting 1 or 2 types of cancer. So depending on the breed, the veterinarian generally knows which cancer or which 2 cancers that canine is really predisposed to getting based upon its breed. So this is a very helpful tool in aiding in the diagnosis of cancer. So if it comes back as a high risk for cancer, the veterinarian would look at what type of breed of canine that it is, what age the canine is, and based upon prior history with similar canines of similar ages, similar breeds of canine with similar ages, the veterinarian would have a pretty good idea of what cancer type it probably is and the location, or if it's not cancer, probably a good idea of what other ailment may be afflicting the canine, and then proceed with further diagnostic testing. The advantage here, of course, is if it is a cancer and the animal is asymptomatic, then the cancer is probably an early stage, right? It's probably a stage 1 or a stage 2, or maybe a precancer, probably hasn't metastasized to other organs. Therefore, it's more operable. Treatment is generally more effective while the canine is asymptomatic because its immune system hasn't been as compromised. And so this test, we believe, will lead to a lot more early detection of cancer in canines, saving a lot more lives, saving a lot more pain and suffering, reducing costs to the canine owner and to the animal health system as well. So we're really excited about this opportunity. We're obviously not the only company excited about this, because Volition has signed 5 licensing deals so far, or supply and distribution agreements so far for this test. 2 of them in the past 12 months or less than 12 months. And we're really excited about those opportunities. So as you can see from this slide here, you can see some of the partners that we've signed. So actually it's 6 supply and distribution agreements that we've signed. The ones that will really start to launch this year and beyond and generate significant revenue for us are the expected deals that we've signed with Heska and IDEX. And as you can see from the slide here, in March of last year, we signed a $28 million licensing agreement with the Heska Corporation in Colorado, $10 million upfront payment from Heska, then an additional $18 million in milestone payments. We expect the 13 of that 18 million in the first half of this year. So it will be another injection of non-dilutive capital into Volition expected this year. In return for the 28 million in upfront and licensing upfront and milestone payments, we also receive up to $10 per test for every test that Heska processes. And we gave Heska exclusivity on the point of care front and non-exclusive rights to the reference labs. There are 2 ways to analyze a canine's blood sample. One is a traditional way of separating plasma from serum through a centrifugation process, freezing the sample and shipping it off to a reference lab for analysis. And then the results come back in a few days, typically. The other way to analyze the canine's blood sample is through a point of care technology. ESCA has the Element I+ point of care machine, and that's at a veterinary clinic where the veterinarian would be able to insert the blood sample directly into a cartridge and then into the machine and get results in less than 10 minutes. So HESCA is one of the leaders in the United States in the point of care technology segment of the market, and they have exclusive rights to the point of care technology. That did allow us to sign another deal, a global supply agreement with IDEX Laboratories in Portland, Maine. I believe the largest animal health diagnostics company globally. And we are now supplying them with our canine blood test. They launched this month, and there's a lot of excitement around this launch. This is through their reference labs, and again, we're getting a similar price point for each test that IDEX sells. So between the IDEX agreement, between the HESCA agreement and the other 4 agreements, we expect a significant growth in terms of our top line revenue and, of course, our bottom line profitability as these companies really begin to market and launch this product through their veterinary communities. So we're very excited about this opportunity. It should be very good in terms of revenue growth for Volition, but it's also very good for the animal health community, because now for the first time in animal health, you'll be able to take your canine in and get it screened while it's still asymptomatic for cancer, and ideally identify a number of these cancers earlier when treatment is much more effective and outcomes are much better. So really excited about this opportunity. And then with the time remaining, I'd like to just talk a little bit about our NETs, or our NETosis program. So just bear with me while I scroll back through the slide deck. So this vertical is called NETs. NETs is an acronym for neutrophil extracellular traps. And as you can see from this diagram, NETs are one of your body's first immune responses to an infection or a virus, to an invading pathogen. What happens is that your white blood cells migrate to the infection site. They unwind their cellular material and inject mononucleosomes or chromatin material into your bloodstream. And as you can see there, they act as a spider web or a net, hence the acronym NETs. And they contain cytotoxic proteins, and their function is to envelop and try and neutralize and kill the invading virus or bacteria or pathogen. Now, for reasons unknown, in certain individuals, the body's immune system overreacts and overproduces NETs to a significant level. And the problem is that when there's an overproduction of NETs, there's an overproduction of these cytotoxic proteins. They cause damage to the tissue, they cause thrombosis, they cause stroke, and ultimately, this is what kills patients in a number of diseases, in particular sepsis and COVID-19, which is where we're aiming our applications initially. As you can see here, sepsis is a significant problem. It's the leading cause of death in hospitals. You can see in the United States alone, 1.7 million US adults are infected with sepsis each year. 270,000 die as a result. And these are infections that occur when people are going into hospitals, usually for other treatments, for other surgeries or other sicknesses. And unfortunately, many people catch a sepsis infection, and unfortunately, many people die from it. The problem with sepsis infections as well as COVID-19 infections is that if a person is confirmed infected with either of these pathogens, yet the person is mildly symptomatic or asymptomatic, with COVID-19 patients, the patient's generally sent home to isolate. With sepsis, the patient is monitored. But what happens in certain sepsis patients and COVID-19 patients is that in certain cases, the second or third day, the fifth day, the sixth day of infection, what have you, some of those patients get really, really sick from this infection. And so there's a reactionary medicine, right? If the patient is isolating at home with COVID-19, they try and rush back to the hospital, try and get admitted to the hospital, try and get an oxygen tank or a ventilator. With sepsis patients go from mild to highly symptomatic very, very quickly. And so there's a rush at the hospital because most of these infections are occurring in the hospital. And so most of the severe illnesses or reactions from sepsis infection are occurring in hospitals. So there's a rush to treat the patient. In either case, this is reactionary medicine, right? It'd be much better to start treating these patients ahead of them getting extremely sick or highly symptomatic from infection. But the problem is there's no good way currently to predict which patients will progress from mild symptoms to severe symptoms. We have a technology that is able we believe is able to do that. Our blood test for NETs accurately measures with over 99% accuracy the quantity of NETs in a person's blood sample. And we know that there's a strong linear correlation between quantity of NETs in the patient's blood sample and disease severity from both sepsis and COVID. Now, what we don't know is how soon after the overproduction of NETs does a person get really ill. We believe there's a lag time. If there's a sufficient enough lag time between overinjection or the cytokine storm and highly symptomatic reaction to the overproduction of cytotoxic proteins, then there's an opportunity, a window there to triage that patient, to get that patient medical resources ahead of the onset of severe symptoms so that the body's immune system can be primed, so that the person can be prepped. So ideally, they're better able to handle the severity of symptoms that's coming, or the severity is reduced because the immune system or the body's been prepped, whether it's from vitamins, antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, oxygen, ventilator, whatever it might be in terms of prepping that patient. So we're really excited about this. What we do know is that we measure NETs very accurately. There's a strong linear correlation between disease severity and quantity of NETs. We're just looking to see how much of a lag time there is. So we're running longitudinal studies in Europe to assess what that lag time is. And so if there's a 12 or 24 or 36-hour window of opportunity between a person's NETs levels spiking in their blood sample, so the idea is that a sepsis patient in the hospital will be tested several times per day to monitor his or her NETs level. And if there's a huge spike from, say, 50 or 100 nanograms per microliter to 20,000 nanograms per microliter, we know that patient's about to get really, really sick from the sepsis infection, and the treatment can begin on that patient ahead of the onset of severe symptoms, ideally to reduce the severity of symptoms, reduce morbidity rates, and reduce mortality rates. So we're really excited about this program as well. And I believe that's really all we have time for in terms of the two verticals. I should note that our NETs our NETs test is CE marked in Europe. So we do have clearance to sell the product in Europe. We're waiting on additional clinical data. Once that data comes, and assuming the data does show a meaningful lag time between the spike in NETs and the onset of severe symptoms, then we will look to commercialize this test in Europe first and then move to the US as well. And I'll just point you to our financial snapshot, and then I'll open it up to questions. Sorry for the skipping through the deck, but as you can see from this slide here, a little bit more in our financials. At the end of Q3, we had 16.4 million in cash. Market cap is around the 150 million mark. Again, our ticker VNRX. You can see the 52-week range, earning about a little over 2 million per month. Also remember that we have the 13 million in expected HESCA milestone payments coming in the first half of 2023. Those are non-dilutive capital injections for Volition. We also expect revenue from sales from HESCA, IDEX, and from our other licensing partners. We have 5 analysts covering the company. We have Cantor Fitzgerald, we have Zacks, we have E.F. Hutton, we have Benchmark Company, and we have the Maxim Group. In terms of capital structure, we have a very clean and very strong cap structure in the sense that we only have common shares and stock options on the cap table. We have no warrants. We have no convertible debt. We have no preferred shares. We have no equity lines. We do have a effective S3. We've carved out a $25 million at the market facility with Jefferies. We have a lot of dry powder left on the S3. Very strong insider ownership. Management team and board, we own about 17.5% of the outstanding shares. And that's all been for cash that we've put into the company directly. So we're really excited about the opportunities in front of us. I think 2023 is largely a veterinary story and beyond 23. And then in 2024, I think NETs hopefully really begins to take a front and center stage as well. So we're really excited about the next few years, particularly about this year and particularly about the launch of our blood test with our partners IDEX and Heska. So there's more information on Volition at volition.com. Hopefully all of you will go to our website, learn more from different videos and information we have on our website. And hopefully you'll sign up for our email alerts, which is at the bottom center of our landing page. You can sign up for email alerts from Volition. And again, thank you all very much for listening to my presentation today. VolitionRx Limited, ticker symbol VNRX on the NYSE American Stock Exchange. And I'd now like to open it up to any questions. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I am Greg Aurand, Senior Research Analyst in Healthcare Services and Medical Devices at Noble Capital Markets. I'd like to welcome Scott Powell and thank you, Scott, for the presentation today.
You're very welcome, Greg, and thanks to Noble Capital for having me on the program today and for the opportunity to present the VolitionRx story to your listeners.
Let's just ask a few questions. Basically, too, in terms of the science, your platform Nu.Q tests for nucleosome debris. You discussed this very briefly, but can you provide some additional detail about what the nucleosome actually is and what the debris represents?
Sure. So what science has shown is that when a person has an elevated level of cell detritus or cell death, that the body ends up dumping some of the chromatin fragments called nucleosomes into the bloodstream. Typically, when cells are being born and cells are dying, they're more or less in unison, and so the dead cells are generally digested by enzymes locally. But when a person has elevated levels of cell death, the cell debris, the nucleosome debris, there's so much of it that the body can't digest it through enzymes, and so some of the nucleosome debris ends up in blood. So there are two things that we're doing with our technology. One, we're quantifying, right? So if there's a significant elevation in the amount of nucleosome debris in a person's blood sample, there's something wrong with that person, right? There's something causing elevated levels of cell death. Oftentimes it's cancer. It can be other diseases that cause elevated levels of cell death. It could also be sports injury, car crash, things of that nature. And so we found that in animals and in humans, there is a correlation between certain diseases and certain cancers and elevated levels of nucleosome debris, particularly in canines. We found a very high correlation between that and hemangiosarcoma and lymphoma. And in addition to quantifying nucleosome debris, we're also able to isolate the individual nucleosomes and look for mutations or modifications that are aberrant to the proteins, to the DNA strands that surround the proteins, and use those as signatures or markers that are specific for certain other diseases, so we can get more granular with perhaps different types of cancers. So it's both quantity and then also looking for specific signatures or aberrations that are associated with particular disease states.
Yeah, interesting science indeed. It was probably difficult to find this science aspect and the correlation, but obviously you solved the problem. Just in terms of your Nu.Q vet cancer test, you've got several licensing and partnering deals with Heska and also IDEX and the reference lab side. Are there other license or partnering arrangements forthcoming?
We are certainly open to additional partnering or licensing agreements. We feel that the more canines, the more vets, the more canine owners that have access to this test, the better for everyone. So it comes down to obviously having discussions with folks, negotiating. We're really excited about the relationships with IDEX and Heska. They've been great partnerships so far. Some of you may have seen the CEO of IDEX actually on his personal LinkedIn account talked about how excited he was about the Nu.Q vet cancer screening test last week, just after the J.P.Morgan healthcare event. So we've got a great relationship with IDEX and Heska. The two of them are very dominant players in the animal health diagnostics space in the U.S. So we're expecting really good things with these partnerships. Obviously, significant revenue growth for Volition, but also really doing some great things for the veterinary community. So we are definitely open to additional partnerships, licensing agreements, and if and when those are signed, we'll of course announce those publicly.
Excellent. Moving to Nu.Q NETs, which you talked about and sound very excited about as a diagnostic. You mentioned it was CE marked back in May of last year. This is a breakthrough diagnostic, in my opinion, for sepsis and thrombosis. Where are you with the FDA study, and what is the commercial outlook at this point going forward in 2023 and beyond?
We're having some initial discussions with the FDA. We want to understand what they would be looking for in terms of clinical design and clinical results. So, we're hopeful that we can, move forward through, the FDA protocol and process. Hopefully, as a breakthrough designation device would be ideal for us, as opposed to having to go through, a full-blown PMA study. We'll have some European data. So we're hopeful that between the European data and whatever U.S. data the FDA wants us to, to produce, that we're hopeful that we can move this product forward in the U.S. But it's likely to be, a European launch, possibly next year if we can get some additional data from our European clinical sites over the course of this year. It would be great to be able to launch that next year. It's a huge problem, right? The doctors and the patients, no one has any idea who's going to progress from mild symptoms to really severe symptoms. And so it's reactionary medicine as opposed to, somewhat more preventative medicine. But at least the patient and the doctor is informed that this patient's going to get really sick really soon. And so at least something can be done ahead of time. We're also looking at potential technologies that could be used in conjunction with our diagnostic test that would actually be able to remove excess levels of NETs. So this is where it gets really, really interesting. So we could potentially have the diagnostic test to predict who's going to get really sick. And then when the NETs level starts to spike through the cytokine storm, see if there's a way to remove a certain amount of the NETs debris to just, stop the severity from actually occurring in the first place. So essentially negating the need for oxygen, for drugs, for various therapies. So we're really excited about this area of science, and it's really a new area of science for us and for others. And in addition, we have a significant amount of intellectual property surrounding both, animal health and NETs and our core platform technology, which I think is very unique with Volition. We have 12 US patents granted, 15 European patents, 128 patents pending, really strong intellectual property protection. I'm not sure investors really appreciate or understand the amount of IP that we have.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. You didn't touch on this too much for sake of time, but you have a Nu.Q Cancer blood diagnostic for colorectal and lung cancers. This sounds very promising, but can you tell me just a little bit about development timelines there?
Yeah, I think those will be a little bit farther down the road in terms of moving them into commercial status. It's really, I think, a vet story this year and beyond, and then a NET story next year and beyond. Colorectal cancer and lung cancer are very important to us. A lot of our investors know us as a colorectal cancer story. We do have a study that has resumed with the National Cancer Institute here in the United States. We're hopeful that we'll continue collecting samples, but we'll be given the samples perhaps the end of 2024. And then, potentially in 2026, potentially have something here in terms of, cleared or an approved blood test for colorectal cancer, kind of like Exact Sciences, or, if you look at the colonoscopy. The problem with colorectal cancer screening is not that we lack a good diagnostic test. The colonoscopy is highly accurate, about 95% sensitive. It's very, very accurate. The problem is compliance. People don't like going for the colonoscopy procedure. People don't like fecal tests, so many people don't do them. Compliance is about 62% in the US, 50% in Europe. It's a big, big problem because you have a cancer that's asymptomatic in the early stages. And if people refuse to get tested, what happens? Some of them will become symptomatic. They will be diagnosed with colorectal cancer because it's asymptomatic in the early stages. If they're symptomatic, they have a stage 3 or a stage 4, and there's not much that can be done. So a blood-based modality really obviates and solves the compliance problem, because while a person may say, I'm going to wait a couple of years for that colonoscopy and delay, that same person probably would not refuse a blood test, particularly if it were just added to their battery of blood work that they're doing anyway for an annual physical, for instance. So drive compliance. We get a lot more people screened for a blood test much earlier than many of those people will be screened for through a colonoscopy or a fecal test, catch a lot of these cancers while they're still early stage. And then a positive result in our blood test would really force that colonoscopy, because the person would be very scared saying, oh my gosh, I just tested positive for colorectal cancer. I admit I'm 10 years overdue for that colonoscopy. I'm going to make an appointment tomorrow with my GI because I want to know what, if it is colorectal cancer, or is it a false positive? If it is colorectal cancer, what stage is it? And what are my treatment options? So we're really excited, particularly about the colorectal cancer program at Volition.
I think it's an exceptional program longer term. I look for progress on that. Just in general terms, also with an eye toward time, give me your thoughts, if you can, on what you perceive are the forward challenges for VolitionRx, and then in general, the life sciences and healthcare markets, especially post-COVID, we hope post-COVID environment.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of challenges, I think we're blessed. I think that the challenges are, where do we focus our resources? We have so many different programs. I mean, they're all off of the same core technology. So it's not like we're distracted, but they're, figuring out where to devote resources. So I think most of the resources are going now into the animal health part of the company, because that's where there's tremendous interest. That's where we're a disruptive technology, because up until our test, there was really nothing to screen inexpensively in a non-invasive fashion without harm to the canine until our blood test has entered the market. So there's a huge demand for a test like this. So I think our challenge is really just managing the team, expanding the team, figuring out where to allocate resources, and really trying to allocate those resources to programs that will drive value for the company, drive value for shareholders, and ultimately get us to a profitable stage in the company's history, and continue moving into the commercialization path.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, thank you, Scott, for this opportunity to discuss VolitionRx.
You're welcome.
For the viewers, that's ticker VNRX. And for the viewers, this is an important time for VolitionRx as you listen to Scott speak about the opportunities. There are several catalysts, as I see it, on the horizon that will continue to move the company forward, including the recent launching of Nu.Q Vet with IDEXX reference labs, the expected launch of the Nu.Q Vet cancer point of care test with HESCA, the possible receipt of an FDA breakthrough device designation for Nu.Q NETs, obviously continued or growth in commercial revenue opportunities, and additional milestone payments possibly from HESCA, as well as additional product development we didn't even talk about. And with that, thank you, Scott, again, and thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Greg. Thanks to Noble Capital.
With more than 6,000 small and micro-cap companies listed, if you're looking for the next Apple, then Channelchek truly is your trade. It's an investor community where you can access independent Wall Street research, advanced market data, balanced news, corporate videos, and podcasts. You can even register to attend in-person Meet the Management Series luncheons, and to be part of the preeminent annual Small and Micro-Cap Investor Conference, NobleCon. And here's the best news. Since Channelchek is sponsored by the featured companies, premium membership requires no investment. It's absolutely free. So check it out. Log in today. Find out why Channelchek is North America's leading source of research on the companies that just may change the world.